aloha mai kako. Welcome everyone to our session. Thank you for coming. So the first thing we're going to do is actually talk about where we are. So, there we go. Clicked on the wrong link. All right. Okay, so let's go back here. Okay, so what we wanted to do is think about where everyone is. And so I'll introduce myself first. I'm Lindley Shamatlis, and I usually live in Hawaii, which is Native Hawaiian land. But right now I'm actually in New York on Lenape land. And so if everyone could write in the chat where you're coming from, and if you know what Indigenous land you're on. And if you don't know, you can look it up at this nativeland.ca. So Mahea, you want to introduce yourself too?
Aloha mai kako. I'm Mahea Lani Ahia, Mahea for short. You're welcome to call me. I am a diasporic Kanaka Maoli, so I was raised on the Ahashiman lands in Southern California near the San Juan Mission. And then finally was able to return home to my father's ancestral lands here on Maui. So I'm in Malu'uluolele, which is Lahaina area of Maui right now. And then when I'm not at home with my ohana with my family, then I'm at Manoa for UH Manoa.
And there we go. Okay. Okay, now we're back in the slides. Okay, so yeah, so welcome everyone, and thank you for writing in where you are and what land you're on. So one of the things we're going to be thinking about today is we have OER, we have open pedagogy, and then we also have Ike Hawaii or Hawaiian knowledge, and then Indigenous knowledge. And so we're thinking about how these intersect and what does it mean to have Indigenous open pedagogy and OER. And so first, we wanted to just tell you about Hawaii Review. We're both on the editorial board of Hawaii Review, and both of us are past editors-in-chief. So Hawaii Review is a literary and arts journal published through the Student Media Board at UH Manoa. We have been a key publisher and continue to be for the work of Kanaka Maoli, Oiwi, and Indigenous Pacific Islanders in Hawaii Nei and abroad. Our focus includes centering Native Hawaiian, Indigenous Pacific Islander, and local voices, including Pidgin on the worldwide stage. And we also center the work of LGBTQIA, Mahu, and Two-Spirit writers and artists in a variety of genres and media. And so one of the things that we've been doing since I've been the editor-in-chief, and then since I've had my since we've all been working together, and now our friend Erin Ki'ilau is editor-in-chief. So what we've been doing is that in keeping with the best practices of arts journal governance and Indigenous polity and governance, Hawaii Review is run as an editorial collective. And so the editor-in-chief and managing editor work to facilitate, encourage, and support fellow editors in an egalitarian structure, which centers the voices and editorial talents of the editorial board. And so everyone really works together and supports each other. And so it's a board rather than being sort of a top-down run. We all really work together and support each other in different projects. And this is our link to our website. So when we're thinking about Indigenous knowledge and how it intersects with OER and open pedagogy. So some of the things we think about with Indigenous knowledge is protecting Indigenous knowledge, because not all Indigenous knowledge is meant to be shared with other people. There are certain types of knowledge that really only certain families are supposed to know, or certain elders are supposed to know. And so we want to think about things like kuleana and intellectual mo'oku auhau. So basically, what are the responsibilities that people have to this knowledge, and what is the intellectual genealogy? So who is this knowledge meant for? Who is it meant to be shared with? Who's responsible for it? Where does it come from? What is its intellectual genealogy? Would elders in the community want it to be shared? With whom? Is it appropriate to modify this knowledge, and who may modify it? Should this be credited to an individual or an individual artist? Should it be credited to a community? And then also, how can this be protected from appropriation and from inappropriate use? And so also you can see work by Professor Kaumea in the UH Manoa College of Education, because she gives a lot of really interesting examples in her work of ways that people have both succeeded and sort of failed at presenting Indigenous knowledge and integrating it into curriculum. And so she kind of goes into some of the pitfalls and some of the challenges of doing that in a way that really is respectful towards the knowledge. So when we're thinking about Creative Commons licenses and Indigenous knowledge, and just when we're doing OER materials, it's important to make sure things are Indigenous led, they're Indigenous centered. So they're relying on Indigenous ethics and principles. So, you know, when you're doing research within a university setting, you always follow the IRB protocols, but when you're doing Indigenous centered work, you want to also follow the Indigenous ethics and principles. You also want to think about relationships, relationality, and kinship ties. And there's also the consideration of past generations and future generations. And so what are you providing for future generations? And so one thing to really think about is using the full range of CC licenses. So for example, I posted in here an example of this one press, Metonymy Press, has actually published this work by an Indigenous author, Lindsay Nixon, and the license that they have on it is Creative Commons by NC and D. And so in this example, that would mean that you can make copies of it and give it to your students once you bought a copy, but you can't sell it commercially and you can't make derivatives of it or do other things with it. And so for Indigenous knowledge, because of the way that we have to think about protecting Indigenous knowledge, we really do want to think about using that full range of CC licenses. So some materials may not be as open as we're used to, but there are ways to work with that. Also, you want to make sure everyone who contributes is comfortable with the license. And you also want to make sure that there are guides to using materials and make sure it's clear and easy to use. Because if we look at some of the examples from Professor Julie Kaumea, there are times when people got materials to use to basically further Hawaiian education in schools, but because teachers didn't know how to use them and had no training, they ended up using them in ways that were not helpful to people or were offensive. And so we really want to make sure in any Indigenous centered OER that it really is Indigenous centered and everyone knows what the potential issues might be. So in terms of some of the work that we've been doing with Hawaii Review, what we've been thinking to do, a lot of it, because again, we're protecting Indigenous knowledge, is that sometimes the materials that we're using as the primary materials, so for example, readings that you give students, we're often having that come from freely available online materials. And then what we do from that is build OER infrastructure using that or linking out to that. And so we're building things like lesson plans and auxiliary materials and all kinds of different educational materials based on students being able to read particular things online and then to go into our OER materials and use those. And our materials are Creative Commons CC BY as much as we can, whereas some of the online materials, they can have access to it, but they can't necessarily reproduce it at will. And so these are some of the materials that we recommend or that we're thinking to use. So University of Hawaii has an OER team, which I'm on also. There's also a UH OER repository, and then I'm working on a UH OER publishing guide. And so those are some of the OER related materials. In terms of online materials that we're thinking of for our collections and our work with specifically Native Hawaiian knowledge, Hawaii Review has all of its issues and back issues digitized in different places. There are specifically Hawaiian knowledge repositories online, such as Ulukau, which is a dictionary and has books and all kinds of materials. There's Hulili Journal. There's also Palapala Journal. Sometimes the College of Education has materials by Kanaka scholars in their Educational Perspectives Journal. And recently there was a Maori-led initiative that put together a Mana Wahine reader on women's knowledge in a Maori and Indigenous context. And also UH Manoa has Scholar Space, which is our open access digital institutional repository. And it is actually available to people who are not at UH Manoa. So a lot of material is there. So those are kind of the materials that we are looking into or that we work with. So then I just wanted to give you, or we just wanted to give you some more resources in case you're interested in Indigenous pedagogy. So, and we give you the link to our slides so you can look at these later. And then we also have our references list of specifically Hawaiian knowledge. And so now I will turn over to Mahea, and let me know if you need to click slides or move or anything.
We should be good with this one. I'll try and keep to it. So the Mauna Kea Syllabus Project is one of our big projects that Hawaii Review is helping to co-sponsor and to put out and publish in an OER format. So we're really excited about the overlapping of our goals in order to bring this to fruition. So Mauna Kea is our sacred mountain on Hawaii Island in the Ahupua'a, or traditional land division of Ka'ohe. It's Papahanaumoku, which is our earth mother who gives birth to the islands. Mauna Kea is not only the piko, or the umbilical connection or center of our Hawaiian worldview, it's also the tallest mountain in the world, from its seafloor base to its highest peak. And this sacred piko is where humans, or Kanaka, can reach closest to Wakea, our sky father. So we have stories of the birth of humanity through our kalo plant, which are associated with this mauna. And it basically sets up our general relationship of the aina, our lands, as a higher in statute than Kanaka, humans. And it teaches us how to be humble and uphold our kuleana to care for and protect the aina. So when we discovered that there was a proposal for the 30-meter telescope, or TMT, they were desiring to build a $4 billion, I believe it's actually more expensive now, observatory, which is 18 stories high on the top of Mauna Kea. So TMT, intending to construct in a designated conservation zone, ignoring numerous environmental concerns, really troubled us. There are legalities of land claims, because those are Hawaiian Kingdom Crown lands. And TMT continues a legacy of settler astronomy, which has been plagued by mismanagement by Hawaii state and government, along with UH. And so despite the willful ignoring of Kanaka voices and community members who clearly voiced a lack of consent, the Kia'i, or protectors of Mauna Kea, have committed to education and empowerment until all the telescopes are removed from the sacred mountain. And so, which brings me to our origin story of the Mauna Kea Syllabus Project. I was one of a number of scholar activists and Kia'i protectors who gathered to stop the desecration of the Mauna in July of 2019. And part of my kuleana responsibility was to set up educational classes, which we ended up creating what we call Pu'uhuluhulu University. And we offered literally hundreds and hundreds of free and accessible classes and educational materials in the context of a frontline action. And so we offered everything from Hawaiian politics and history to Hawaiian science, culture, music, dance, carving, social work, religion, you name it. We had cultural experts, not just academics. And so that was really important, that we were acknowledging and bringing to highlight the voices of our community who had been doing this work for a long time. There is a long history of accessibility to popular education. And so we wanted to make sure that we would be a venue to offer all kinds of levels to all ages, from keiki, from children, to our kupuna ancestors. So within this context, we are basically asked by our international allies, do you have resources that we can go back to our different nations or different countries and be able to teach about your issue and to build solidarity? And so that is part of our origin story, is that this Mauna Kea Syllabus Project was a fruition of that call to action to help educate, both here in Hawaii and abroad. And so looking at our genealogy, we have genealogical connections to Mauna Kea in our cosmology and our genealogical chants. But for the syllabi itself, we also have a genealogy, which is we're basing ours on Standing Rock, Black Lives Matter, and immigration syllabi. And so it's really important to Kanaka to acknowledge the source of their knowledges. And so we looked carefully at the different scopes and thematic sections of the Standing Rock syllabus and have adapted their model for it with our historical timeline of settler colonialism, each with sections of collated articles that people can read. And then adding to that, we appreciated how the immigration syllabus had guiding questions at the beginning of each section to sort of orient and guide readers into what to look for within those particular resources. And then beyond that, we really loved how the Black Lives Matter syllabi included ways to actually teach the syllabus. So we have built upon those, and then our own scholars from UH Manoa, some of our senior scholars like Noi Silva and Leilani Basham had started a Google Drive full of sources that they were teaching from. And so those are our foundations of how we began our project. And it's ultimately a pedagogical tool. So what we're doing is using these forms of accessible and free resources to empower or build what we call EA education. So EA is our life breath, our sovereignty. It's a form of empowerment. And we think that we're returning the power to the people by sharpening their tools of decolonization, by providing all these free and accessible resources. We really recognize that there's a variety of sources to learn. So our syllabus has articles, book chapters, videos, podcasts, collections of music and film. And because we discovered some of the sections that we're looking at, like gender and sexuality in Hawaii, there aren't as many resources available now. So we've engaged some of our top scholars to produce some cutting edge scholarship to include it. So it's not only a collation of materials that are existing, but we're also creating new material. And so ultimately we'll have a website with the documents available. We'll have accompanying teachers' guides from everything from family learning and children all the way up through high school and college appropriate curriculum and lesson plans. Because we follow one of the Hawaiian learning ideas that ohe pau ka'ike ho'okahi hala, which means that all knowledge is not held in one school. And that's really important for us to acknowledge the different types of learning available. One of the other things we've done is we've commissioned a series of 10 amazing art pieces about the different akua or elemental gods associated with the Mauna. And you can see Poliahu here. That's the slide that we've done. And Joy Enomoto, one of our award-winning artists and scholars created that one along with 9 others. And then we also are in the process of partnering with Nohea Hirahara, who has Native Stories, and that's a podcasting group, and we're partnering with them to collect the stories of our elders in the movement as well as some of the leaders. So we're really excited to be able to bring all those different voices together, which shows just how collaborative the process really is. We wanted to make sure it wasn't limited to just scholars, so we wanted to reach out to as many different voices as possible. Right now, we have over 50 contributors so far, and I'm sure that number will continue to grow. They're equally academics, activists, artists, community members, community leaders. Many of us are queer Kanaka and allies who are on the steering committee or the organizers, and we're definitely informed by indigenous feminisms and decolonial practice in order to set the stage for what our larger project is. And part of the project is a form of restoring. So the missionaries came to Hawaii 200 years ago in 1820, and it's been 128 years since our legitimate kingdom government was overthrown. And because there have been so many myths of annexation and myths of statehood, part of our job is to use our own voices to tell our own stories. And that is comes under what Indigenous rhetorical sovereignty is. And Scott Richard Lyons says that rhetorical sovereignty is the inherent right and ability of peoples to determine their own communicative needs and desires in the pursuit of self-determination. Rhetorical sovereignty requires, above all else, the presence of an Indian voice, speaking or writing in an ongoing context of colonization, and setting at least some of the terms of debate. Ideally, that voice would employ a native language. And so that's part of what we're doing. A lot of the materials in here will be Maka'olelo Hawaii. We will have Hawaiian language resources for those who can speak and to include and increase our native speakers. And part of the other restoring element is that a lot of people know about our 2019 standoff. It hit social media in a very wide way. only some are familiar with the standoff that happened in 2015, and even less are aware that the story actually begins in legal battles 2 decades ago. It's been over 20 years. So part of our mission is to actually tell a more full and complete story in our own voices by capturing them on film, video, podcasts, and then other articles that are currently being written. And another important issue is that it's a living document. So it speaks to indigenous tropes of the vanishing Indian, who's always leaving Kanaka Maoli in a distant past, regrettable but inevitable losses, right? As Gerald Weisner named survivance, it's our continued presence now. And it fights what Patrick Wolf describes as settler colonialism and their desire to erase us in order to replace us, basically to use our lands, but not have us present anymore. So as a living document, it allows us to keep changing and updating the manual and the lesson plans. We can continually call in for new resources over the years to come. And this is really important because our fight to protect Mauna Kea is not over by any means. And so as more things happen, we'll need more ways to share our stories as it develops. Part of that is looking at the environmental effects on the mountain. There's been leakage of sewage and other known environmental damages. And many of the telescopes have been already assigned decommission, although that hasn't yet happened. So we will use our document to chronicle all the different ways that we can educate about our environment of Hawaii related to Mauna Kea. And that relates to Noi Noi Silva, what she names Mo'oku'auhau consciousness, which is that genealogical connection from the Mauna to our future. It ensures that we always have in mind, how is this going to affect the generations to come? How are we going to pass on our valuable wisdom? How are we going to share that knowledge with those both here and very far abroad and to come? And one of the things that we do that with is by focusing on our own Kanaka Maoli epistemologies, our native ways of knowing and being. And so one of the things that I'm most happy about this document is it's based on a mele, or one of our chanted songs that was composed for the Mauna by our leader and Kumuhula Antipua Case. This particular song is done in a call and response fashion, and it calls out to first the descendants of the Mauna, then to our oceanic cousins, and then to other indigenous folks who have similar issues of Mauna and water issues, and then finally to all those who love Hawaii and our Mauna. And it goes like, e na umakua, e na hoaina, e na ho velolike, e na ho pele, e na ho aloha. And so it just does this call over and over to people to come in and join us in our struggles and to see the solidarity that we can build. And one of the most important things about having OER and other open, accessible, and adaptable resources is that we can share them with each other and learn from each other. So finally, our thematic sections follow these different kinds of forms based on our own PICO, our center, and then moving out to reach larger audiences, knowing that different types of people learn in different ways, and following our ethical research protocols, which Lindley, they did a great job talking about a lot of the issues that we deal with. And I always refer back to Linda Tuhiwai Smith's foundational Maori text, Decolonizing Methodologies, where she really details the damage of anthropologists and other intellectual property theft, which is a form of erasure of our voices and our agency. And it reminds us to always honor the wishes and desires of our communities. So our project is a very community-based, collaborative, place-based project. And we're committed to maintaining those relations that we've built along the way and not just stopping those relations when the project ends, right? As in a lot of academia, you finish your own personal project and then you move on and you don't go back and see how it's benefited those who helped you along the way. So we hope that Mauna Kea Syllabus Project will be both a process and a model for Pono ethical community-centered scholarship. We really do believe that the OER format is an amazing tool to ensure wide access, affordability, and adaptability for all of our relations. And so with that, I will turn it back to Lindley.
So I think we're at time now, but we did want to know if you wanted more information. So we do have a Menti presentation here. So if you wanted to ask us more questions, or if you wanted to know more information, if you could go to this Menti, and you can either do it through this QR code or through this this link. And so it's just to give us more information, like which things did you want to know more about and what questions do you have, and we'll look that over. Yeah, so thank you so much everyone for coming. Halanui loa. And if you wanted to get in touch with us, you can get in touch with us through either through Hawaii Review. So if you just go to hawaiireview.org, or you can, we're at hawaiireview.gmail.com. Or I'm also available through the OER, UHOER, if you send an email to there. That's neat too. So, all right. So thank you everyone for coming. And we look forward to hearing any comments. Oh yeah, sure. The Menti we can put in the, let's see. So it's, I think you just go to menti.com and then it should be voting code is, let me write it down, 90, 30, 19, 1. Or else, let me write the other one down. That's it.
Like that.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Follow.